Nice stadium sound. I like this guitar, I was telling you that already. That's just everything about it, it's good fun. Let's find a different sound. Loose, 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 loose. So quick, I got to charge some batteries up, but that was just a quick bit of fun on a guitar that, well, I'll do a quick intro now while we're still running, and then I'll charge up. But we have Dom's Starcaster, Affinity style Starcaster. And look at this, kind of funny beaky nose thing. Drop shelf there. Cheap string tree, funny, slightly too big, leaning over slightly, nut with some problems in it. Not least, we have the issue of what we've got here is the almost zero angle straight through string there. You can see the D and the G are practically straight through. So we're going to take care of that nut and put another string tree in, even though, well, technically it shouldn't need one. We'll try and readjust the strings first, but we've got a second string tree lined up just to make sure this plays the notes cleanly. Pretty good frets, no complaints about those so far. I mean, a little bit of choke out, but standard stuff, we can improve that. God, look at that angle. I mean, talk about a wodge of sticky uppy thing. That's a really unusual sight to see on a Squier of any kind. This great wall of neck heel sticking up at you, and of course as a result you've got a really tall pickups under here, because this bit here carves down. But do you know what, it works altogether. Even, well, sorry to say, the dreaded tunematic nut style thing. We've got master volume tone sitting in a neat alignment close to the F holes, close to also to the them things pickup holes, and hardest one to reach probably the old what do you call it over there, that thing. Anyway, yeah, so I mean, you know, it's got curves and gloopy carves everywhere. Look at all that light reflecting. So it's a semi-acoustic style with a big neck angle. I mean, I don't know if you can see from here, but yeah, that's a going that way and then going that way. So it's a big intersection of two planes. Yeah, man. Anyway, I like it. Surprised how much I like it. I've played this for about an hour or so offline, and I really enjoying it. Gosh, it's even got slightly authentic non-screw adjustable what's it. I'm running out of words. Anyway, so I'm going to charge the batteries a bit more. We can kind of, it's not a bad nut. I mean, it's not terrible. It's a little pingy, but it's a little bit tall, and it's leaning, well, it's leaning forward, so it's not the best fit in the world. Am I insane, or I keep thinking it? Sorry, you're looking the wrong way now. It's not exactly, it's not even quite a right-handed nut. It seems to be another universal thing, so there's no real sloping, no real slope thing going on any which way. Yeah, right, that's really good. Come on, get in focus. Yes, it's a unisex one. Anyway, but we've definitely got a problem here with these notes. I don't know how well it will play out in thingy. I've lost the focus now. I don't know how well it will play out here, but we've got the G is quite dead. The D is not too bad. The G definitely improves with a press down here. So either and or the slot isn't sloping, but even the slot sloping, if this is kind of virtually horizontal, which it almost is. I think I measured it the other day quickly, and I was kind of thinking that the angle that this goes through out in is, I mean, it's about, be lucky if that was a degree of angle, which is about 1 degree. It's not great, but if with an extremely low angle plus a badly cut slot, those two things together will cancel out any kind of proper resonance. So we've got to take care of that. But apart from those smallish things, I think this is shaping up to be great. So we've got a Starcaster, well, a Strat style nut for replacement. Now I'm kind of made a start off assumption that this is of the typical size for a Strat in terms of string spacing. Well, if it isn't, we're doomed. Yeah, it is the standard. This one's a fraction wider, but we've got the space for that. That's no problem. I mean, I'm talking 1/2 a mil in total. We got the string trays standing by, should we need them. We've got new 9s to go on. So all told, this will just, I'm pretty confident this will polish up nicely. And I'm going to try and, once I've charged up, I'll have a bit of a charging time before I get started. But I'm hoping that it'll run all the way through as a very straightforward setup, a satisfying setup. And I'm going to try not to be in a hurry, quote unquote, because somebody commented on my YouTube just today that I seem to be in a real hurry to get done on one particular setup recently. And actually the comment was valid, because thinking back, I really felt like it. The guitar was supposed to be straightforward, and I added on a load of, the customer added on a load of upgrades, and I sort of did them at no cost, added them in, and then they turned out to take a lot of time, which not only dragged me out into later in the evening, and I was feeling kind of zonked and tired, but it also, on top of that, I wasn't charging for it, which is all very well when you kind of think of being kind and generous and grateful to your customers, that sometimes you do things like that. But then what happens is you find that when it starts to be a bit less simple than you thought, you have to kind of hold on to your goodwill, which is not a great thing, and it kind of serves you right from trying to be generous, and do something without charging for it, which sounds great, sounds kind and nice and all that, but often it doesn't work out that it's any good for you or the customer. So a little lesson, but thank you for that feedback. I think it's also quite difficult being on camera, because once you start the camera rolling, it feels like it's a sort of from now to the end undertaking, and that can feel like a pressure of its own, and have to sort of do it and say something that may be interesting or not completely insane. So whether you imagine so or not, doing it on camera has a bit of a pressure to it. Anyway, folks, I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to charge up a bit more, and then we'll come back and get on the go. So here we go, time to do the setup on this Starcaster from Affinity. I'm going to sneeze. So what am I going to do first? Well, in a situation like this, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to get me a screwdriver. So in this situation, it's a fairly straightforward thing. So hopefully I'm going to, let's see what we'll do. We'll do the nut first. It's always the hardest bit in some ways. And then we'll set the action, check the relief and everything. And then we'll go from there. So let's remove the nut, which we know is slightly faulty anyway, because it's not doing what it should do. So we will remove slack off the strings. So the Starcaster, I've never had one of these before. There's a what is there? A Showmaster, isn't there? There's sort of another budget Squier, which has a tunematic bridge as well, unless I'm mistaken. So these slots actually, they lurk mostly okay, but it's hard to tell. So what I'm going to do, it's not making the right noise. So we've got a combination of break angle or slots which aren't doing so well. So let's get this thing up and out of there. So we'll get a little screwdriver that we can tap, and a little hammer. Oh well. Yes, so the Starcaster, not one I've ever seen before, but actually one of those guitars that actually, when you think about it, they look pretty good, and I was not surprised when there you go. So that's a break, which is kind of what you expect. Wasn't surprised. Horrible hollow plastic nut Yeah. Now I'll keep a bit of this just for the width measurement, which is always handy, and then we'll tap down this other half and see if we can get that gone as well. Yeah, so they're not not hugely respected. It's going to play a I'm glued in type of deal. Yeah, not hugely respected budget style things, but this thing, having played it, this thing just looks quite. God, there's too much glue in there, I'm afraid. I think we're going to have to cut that off, or we'll try going from underneath this side. Yes, anyway, back to the original thought bubble, which was they're not hugely like a lot of budget guitars. They don't have a massively good reputation, but actually getting down to playing it and hearing it. Stuck under there. Right, I think we're going to have to cut this off, I'm afraid. But yeah, nothing. I mean, we when Don brought this over, he was in a sort of two minds. Do I put some money into this, or do I save money and or do I keep the money and buy a more expensive guitar? And of course, that's a possibility, and we always discuss that. One of the things that occurred to me is that it was very clear from talking with Don that he really liked the neck on this guitar. So it seems to me that if you start out with liking a neck, that's actually quite an important start point for whatever you're going to do next. So unless you, for example, can go to a music shop and you can try out, let's say, a classic vibe neck or a classic vibe version of this guitar, and you like the neck on that, and it's clearly a winner for you. But if you can't do that, and there's something there that you've already got that you like, then I would suggest it makes sense not, it's a very big positive, because I know for me that the guitar is all about the neck, first and foremost. If the neck is good, then the guitar is worth building around it or fighting for in terms of improvement. So we started thinking about that, and of course any other guitar, almost every guitar, unless you're very lucky, will need some adjustments. So we've got a neck that Dom likes, fingerboard that he likes, in good condition. Will need relatively minor amounts of adjustment. So we start with that, and we kind of see what's the cost to improve it from there. Yum yum. So we're going to do that. We're going to keep a neck that we know suits Dom, and we're going to work our way away from that and add some, or do whatever the minimum that's required to make it really good. And actually it doesn't need much. It needs the fret leveling, it needs some attention to the break angle over the nut, which we know is poor, and then pickups sound pretty good to me. So really it's just the price of the setup and some string trees. So I'm just getting a fresh blade. Take the oil off it. Since we're going to handle it. And the fresh blade will let me remove this leftover nut. So it's a flat slot, which means we'll use the nut with our little what do you call it, foot in place, which are quite good. The Tusq nuts have that thing where you can either use it as a curved base nut, or that thing acts as a footer, so it can go in a flat slot. So I've got to just try and get the last widgets of the original nut out. It does get glued in quite hard sometimes, so it's not that easy to get every bit of it out. So it still won't come out. So sometimes you have to get a chisel out and prod with that. Can you see? Yes, you can see. So this is just to remove the plastic. I can. Even that's quite difficult to do. It's very well stuck into the right angle there. Wow. It's hardly going to come out with the blade. So sometimes when you're doing this, you have to sort of try and almost bend the blade in to get it to go up against the edge of the slot. One of the things about using a snap-off blade for various different tasks, especially like for scraping repair, sometimes or quite often the blade has to be bent to act as a kind of sort of I don't know what you call it, a bent thing, so that you can basically focus the blade to one, almost a point really, so it's not just a great big flat blade scraping along a surface. You've got it, by curving it, it limits it into a bit of a focus point. Yeah, there's quite a bit of glue used on this to begin with. Let's see what our initial thing. Okay, so that's almost big enough, but a fraction too big. The replacement, which is great. That's what we want. So what I'll do is, let's see if we get this. So that's just a fraction too wide. I think it's because there's glue on the sides, so probably a bit of care will get it to run through. It's very difficult to get it through once it's almost this airtight fit. So it's a kind of a sign that it's just a fraction narrower than we like it. And I can see there's still glue, or plastic and glue, stuck down the face of that side there, which is going to be adding to the thickness and preventing the Hosco nut slot file from working. So again, I'm sort of targeting that blade to try and get at this particular spot here, but it's very reluctant. See, we're sort of just about almost spot on width-wise, but it really doesn't want to. It doesn't want to run smoothly through. So at the moment I'm probably doing nothing but slightly widening it. It's not touching the bottom. Actually, the smoothness of the bottom isn't critical in this case, because we're using the 3-point contact, really, the far edges of the nut and the foot in the middle. So as long as they've got a firm thing to touch down on, they'll do fine. Now this is so close to fit, which is really good, because it means now what I have to do is get out this smaller of my sanding departments, and we will now very carefully hand sand this to fit. Now what we don't have any knowledge of at the moment is height business, whether this fits in the correct height. So we're just going to get it to fit in the slot first of all, then we'll see whether it's actually going to sit high enough. Now I've stopped using adjustable nuts recently, for certainly on the Strat, so I wonder if I should go back to them, because I seem to they would be good for this sort of problem or challenge. So if, for example, if the slot, and occasionally the guitar's nut slot is a fraction too deep, and the standard replacement Tusq nut ends up dropping into the slot and sitting too low, and then we have to shim effectively, or boost one way or another, boost the nut so it sits up taller. So this one currently is it's thickened or pinched somewhere in the middle, where I think there's still some grime catching. This is I think some of this is now residual glue that's coated the sides of the slot. You can see it there. Where's my finger? There it is. So all of that makes just that tiny extra bit of width or thickness to stop it seating in, so it's very nearly there. Again, I can still see it. I still see where it's sticking out too much, but we've such a difficult difficult job getting to it and cutting it back. Very nearly there. So if I have to be careful, because if I'm reducing the sides and getting rid of glue and stuff, then before I know it, the nut will fit in, and I won't want to be cutting any more out with, or sorry, I won't want to be sanding any more off it. So I've got to be conscious of just doing one or the other at any point. So I think that's almost spot on. Can't see much more glue that I can remove. See, that's without doing any more sanding. We're practically, just by taking away the excess glue, we're getting almost to a perfect snug fit. So I think that's probably what I'll try and do, is just achieve it by cleaning up the goo. I think that'll be about as good as I get. Right, so mostly tidy fit, and then really it's a matter of making sure it seats well. There's a tiny bit of it's a bit long in the bass side of things, which is interesting. So if I'm going to take any, I'm going to take a little bit off the bass, because that's nice and flush there, and it's about the right length. So I'm going to trim back the bass side of this nut now. So that's sort of guessing, doing it by guesswork. Nice and smooth, almost there. A little bit more. I was watching some guitarists over the last few days. You know that thing of, you must know that feeling when you discover a guitarist that everyone else knows, but you haven't come across them before, so suddenly it's new to you, which is amazing, because it's still as good as in your own time you're discovering them. So it's like finding them. You get the whole nice experience of it. It's a brand new experience. Anyway, so the guitarists I've known about, one of them's Guthrie Govan, and the other one was Tim Henson of Polyphia, is it? And I listened to some Polyphia live, and I just couldn't believe the technical skill of it. I mean, it's just incredible, amazing, and I just wasn't blown away for an hour listening to this, and didn't expect to spend an hour sitting listening to it, but I did. Anyway, wonderful. And then so I kind of suddenly was finding out about this Tim Henson guy, and I'd never really knew anything about him before, and just thinking, God, how can somebody be so technically brilliant? And anyway, so that was one, and then sort of off the back of that, I think I found out some more about Guthrie Govan, who I'd seen before along the way, and I knew he had a couple of signature guitars and stuff like that, so I'd heard of him, and I knew that he was astonishingly talented, but I did a couple more sort of, I looked around a bit more to see what what he played, and just amazing. And but it's one of those things where you kind of don't know whether, I don't know whether it's inspiring or just something demoralizing. I mean, is it a bad thing when you admit to yourself that you don't stand a hope in hell of ever playing the way they do? And I'm not sure it is. It kind of feels like it immediately. Now, where's my brush thing? It sort of feels like it to start off with, and I think it's probably familiar to lots of people that you think, that's it, I could never do that, damn him, they're just amazing, these people. Now this one is not quite sitting flat for some reason. Anyway, yeah, so I tried not to be depressed by the brilliance of these people. Damn. But it's nice to add someone to the kind of playlist and think, how did they get to be so good? Well, I know how. They practiced a lot and they learned a lot of probably good musical theory stuff and all the stuff that I've never been. See, this is just slightly too. I can't get to this to sand the bottom without widening that considerably. It could take widening, but I don't really think it's going to do it because there's no cutting edge on the side. It's only going to widen it by means of blunt force, really, and that's not going to be conducive with putting a flat bottom on the slot. More than anything, it's going to round off, which is probably what I've already done slightly. So it just, even when it's sat beautifully flat, there's still a sense of a gap under there. So I'm going to leave that be. Yeah, so there you go. There's my discovery of, wow, how do they do it? Type of guitar players. It's actually kind of frightening is one way of describing it. So what I'm just going to do now is I'm going to put these on, and I'm going to guide the strings low down on the posts so that they come up at a better angle for starters, which they didn't do before. And then I'm just going to have a sort of look and see where the first fret action is sitting. It actually looks pretty good, so we may not have too much adjustment to do. Okay, a little bit of adjustment probably still needed. So now weirdly I seem to have lost my tuning fork, which is very odd because it's always around here somewhere. So I think I'm going to have to take it from somewhere else unless I can find the tuning fork. Let's hum a note from this guitar here. Bum, bum, bum. There you go. Okay, that's the first thing. Now I think straight away I can hear with the G a bit better. D is okay. I think we still need a string tree, to be honest. I think this is, let's do it, because there's no point not having good tone off the strings just for the sake of saying to ourselves, it should play great as it is. It should be designed to play well, because the truth is, if it's not, it's not, and that's that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark up where we want to go with it. Not like that. Hold fire. Let's get a spiking thing. Come on. Magnets. Okay. Can you see me? Yeah, you can. So what I'll do is I'm going to drop down the thing directly down, if I can do it. Make a little mark, so there. And we're going to just drill a little pilot hole. I'll use two. One for the deeper part. And one slightly wider at the top, because it's a fairly wide screw fix, and otherwise we'd run the risk of splitting the wood, which we don't want to do. Oh right, we'll also need to hold fire. Hold on while we're at it. Let us do this one as well. We'll use the same hole, but we'll just make it a little bit deeper, a bit wider. Out the way. So this one and this one. Anyway, yes, so bloody genius players. I think for me there's an interesting thing in there about how do normal people, and I mean just normal people who to whom music making or playing the guitar doesn't come instinctively, maybe fairly musical people, but not sort of born musical geniuses. And judging by what I hear of people playing guitar on Facebook pages and posts and stuff, that's probably a lot of people, you know, kind of work hard to have some little competence but aren't brilliant. You know, what do those people do with coming across something as virtuoso as Tim Henson? Well, I don't know really. I think you have to find a way that or you have to work, maybe you have to work quite hard for that not to not to demotivate yourself when you come across somebody as gifted as that. You have to figure out how do you recognize that incredible talent and yet still achieve worthwhile learning for yourself. They all feel pretty good. They'll be a fraction high, but it's okay because towards the end I can, I'll just lower the slots a tiny bit. I say at the end, should I do it now? Well, let's undo these. Let's slap the strings off. Let's mark up the frets with marker pen ready for the leveling, and then let us just finalize and tweak the actions so that we're all in order. So let me mark these up. Now, for those of you who do this sort of thing, It can feel nerve-wracking if you're marking up a maple board like this with a permanent black marker. But if you don't feel comfortable, then mask your fingerboard before you do this part of it. I'm kind of usually very comfortable doing this until I mention it. Also, keep in mind that the finish on these guitars is polyurethane, and that means that if you do accidentally mark the finish between the frets, then you can safely use some cellulose thinners, or you can either use what's it called, naphtha, or Coleman's cooking fuel, as I use, or if that won't get rid of it, then you can use cellulose thinners, because polyurethane isn't something or other sensitive to thinners. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these under load a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to work on outwards from the G first of all. So the idea here is I want to make sure that the height above the first fret, the action of the string above the first fret, is exactly 0.3. It's quite a bit more at the moment, and I want to do it in such a way that I make sure that the slots are wide enough, just in case they're not, but they are. Often I try not to have to adjust them at all, but in this case I would have to take more from the bottom, and the problem with taking more from the bottom is that it's a 3-point nut at this point, and it's too easy at this stage to take too much on one side, because there's only a tiny touching point at either end and the middle block, and it's very easy to get it wrong at this closeness to the correct action. So it's better to do it with this thing here. So I'm just going to go with the 17, and I'm going to cut downwards and throughwards. Still quite a lot, so down and through. That's quite a lot to go down, but you have to be very kind of careful with this, because those Hosco files can cut away material very quickly. Now, how come I've lost, all of a sudden I've managed to lose my little paintbrush brush which I was using. It's not over here, it's not over here. Here, no, here, no, here, no, here, no, even, well, here it is, in the wrong place. Right. So now I can see that as the tricky part on getting a low first fret action, and this is where the guitars have never been designed quite right. They don't, in a sense, they don't expect you to set a low first fret action. If we look, I don't know if you can see it very well, but if we look behind the nut here, where's my thing there? Look behind the nut here. We're almost level with this wood here to get the right backward angle and to the low action that we are looking for, which happens to be lower than I guess Fender would imagine somebody was looking for it. Now I'm just doing this and I just realized something. Catch myself on the fly. Hold on, I'm just going to double check the playing action on this. I think it was close to where I wanted it, but let's do this. Let's do a small adjustment on the playing action down the end first. So that's, I'm going to just zoom out a minute. So for that I'm going to just make sure I'm got to do this. It's almost there. So I'm going to go from 1.5 on the last fret to 1.2 across on this one, which is just about where it is already. So that's fine. A little bit lower needed on the bass. So I'm going to go back to where I was, which is now what am I doing? Oh yes, I'm just measuring and cutting the. So I want these gaps down to 0.3 for really light action on the 17 side. Now it's kind of difficult because you want to be conscious of cutting the front, which will lower it quite quickly, or cutting the back and not cutting the front, which will take longer. So, wrong side, nearly. I think we're about there on this one. Still playing clear, but that will do, I think. So now we're on the B, which will be the 13 side of this one. It's possible, while you do this, it's very possible to just nick the edge of the wood with the fret file, no, the slot file, because you're going at an angle. But I quite like that's where it is there. That'll do me. Now we're going to use the 10. This is quite close, so we don't want to overdo it. 10 side, 10 side. That's so close, I think I'll leave it there. Now we do the bass side of the thing. Okay, so we want the 26, big side down. It's a bit tight. 26. Close. 26. Almost there. Now for the blue, which is the 36. 36. Just on the mark. And the 46. On the mark. So that's as close as you're going to get. It's all just on 30, which is fine. So now what I want to do is go and get another A, because I'm now going to tune up the guitar, put it under load. Okay, so now we're in the land of precision fret leveling. So I can zoom out anymore. No, that's your view. Right, so precision fret leveling. So this is where I'm going to use the legendary banana tool to what am I doing with this? Put that there. Legendary banana tool to level the frets. Now, I saw a couple of interesting things the other day, yesterday in fact, on video. YouTube guitar player what was he doing? He was refretting his 1963 Strat, which was quite a challenge. Or put another way, which had him feeling nervous. Let's just check one thing. I checked it the other night, but yeah, that's pretty flat, but it's got relief. So yeah, he was refretting his 63 Strat, and what he did after refretting it, he then took it to some music store and got it plecked with the legendary pleck machine. And although he didn't, I was kind of looking carefully to see how much detail he gave of the pleck process. It wasn't very detailed, but it did show me a couple of things which was interesting about the process, and it confirmed one thing that it showed that the machine seemed to measure the fall of the frets while under load from the strings. So the guitar would be under load and under compression, and so it did actually what this. Actually, these frets are very good. I mean, strictly speaking, they're all pretty much level. There's a couple of low ones down this end, which I'll just pay a little bit more attention to, see if we can just touch them. But yeah, so it confirmed that the pleck machine was reading the state of the frets in the fully loaded sort of configuration, which was good. And then I could see another shot of it, obviously with the machine doing the fret, whatever the word is, fret beveling-y, no, the fret leveling. Yeah, so the machine did the leveling, but when it did the leveling, the strings weren't on. So the question I'd always thought is, are they? Is that method accounting for the compression in the neck, or is it missing it somehow? But I kind of looked at the diagrams on there, or the readouts on the computer screen, and what was interesting is to see that the way the pleck machine describes what's going on with the neck is almost identical to how I do it with the whiteboard and my marker pen. So it clearly shows in the case of the pleck machine, it maps what I call the hills and valleys of the fingerboard. So that confirms that's exactly what's there, which is really good to see. And then it seems to draw a median line across that bumpy topography, which is what this device does. And then it seems to use the positioning of the frets on that median line, I'm guessing now, as its measurement reference point. So it calculates where the fret top should be if they together were all describing this median line, and then it cuts the frets individually to those positions, and I think that because of that, it effectively does it, as I had been concerned, it effectively does it taking into account the compression effect on the neck, which I was concerned that whether it could or could not do it, and it seems that it does do it, which is good. Anyway, so that sort of put my mind a bit more at rest on the issue of the Pleck machine. Tiny little bit of what I would call fret slap, or it's a zizzle right in the middle there. So I'm just going to kind of just drop the tool on there and just hope that I can just take out, or even out the ups and downs there just a little bit. Now what I've got to check next is the bends. We had some choke outs on bends before, so now what I want to hear is I want to just see where that falls. That falls on the D track. So all the notes are clear. Maybe we'll get that little extra bit freed up as we level the D track now, which is technically over the top of the hill in inverted commas, so it's not necessarily where you would tend to bend unless you're being crazy. Anyway, we'll see. It should be all right. So yeah, it was good to see the Pleck doing very, very similar, in fact very similar to what this method does. And of course then you say to yourself, well look, we're talking, you know, £135 setup with a system that is, I could show you and bore you by demonstrating to you that it's effectively doing exactly what it's doing, the Pleck machine is doing, and it's doing it, of course, for a fraction of the price. God knows how much the machine costs. What I've heard, though, which is quite interesting, and a lot of people say that there's a risk, and Pleck has always said, so I'm told, that they've always said that the machine is there to be used by an intelligent operator who knows what it is they're trying to achieve. And I think that you probably get to see there are some cases where it just gets used like it's a miracle cure. People plug it in, fire it up. Although I have to say, if it's doing what I think it's doing, I can't really see that much scope for a bad operator. I mean, if it's doing what I think it's doing, and it seems to claim to do, then it should be just, it should be quite difficult to mess it up as an operator. But I don't know. Maybe you can. I'd have to have one and run it and try and run it badly to see if I could make it be sloppy. But anyhow, so now on the A and the E strings, or the A and the E track, what I'm kind of looking at doing is I want to even out as much of the hills and valleys as I can find on this neck, and there are a very small amount on this. It's actually turned out to be a surprisingly good condition neck, which is great. Yeah, so it's been in relatively good nick. Good at this end. About the third and about the 12th, so a little tiny bit more of the leveling there. Third and 12th. So concentrating on the third. Concentrating is an anachronism, no, an AKA for pressing down a little bit on the third, and then on the 12th, around the 12th. And it's basically that's what it's telling me are the peaks of some hills at this point in time. So if we just tame those a little bit, then we should get better. I keep losing the plectrum. How can somebody do it there? Side on. Thanks. Nine, a little tiny bit at 9. Let's do it. Now, I've done it a couple of times, and I'm going to recalibrate now. Since I've had a couple of runs at this track, I'm going to recalibrate just to make sure I've got the median shape right. Yeah, I think I do. I think I do. Okay. It's not that I think I haven't, it's just to be sure. It's a good idea just to reconnect. So we said 9, so I'm just going to concentrate a little bit more pressure on 9. 9, 8 and 9 were showing up with a bit more dust anyway, as a slightly higher part of the neck. And it's interesting, when I draw the neck out as this sort of up and downy hills and valleys sort of thing, it looks really extreme, but actually, interestingly, the computer readout on the that thing, plec thing, the computer readout produced an exaggerated thing that looked just like my drawing. So that was kind of very reassuring to see. Okay. So, real-time setup of this Starcaster. I hope I'm not appearing to rush or be wanting to speed along. I'm going to not go off camera to do anything. I hope the batteries will last anyway, but let's see if I can get the just do the whole thing in one go. Sometimes the batteries on the iPhone don't permit it. Okay, that's all right. So what often this was a playable neck before. My aim now is to keep or have this low action, have the low action, and to play without or with as little slap as possible. Very small amount there. I will do another little go on it. I'm conscious that we've got a low action, we've got a flat neck, and we've got a low action and a flat neck, and those two things together are a challenge. We're pushing it quite hard, so we could either alleviate the thing if after a couple of rounds of the leveling we don't alleviate the fret slap to the level that I would want. We do have a sort of option to just raise the action by a tiny amount, and that cures it or gets rid of it. But we're looking for an overall I think I quite like it how it is. We've got a bit of sanding to do, so we're on 1.5 and we're on 1.1. Go down a tiny bit. Sorry, 1.4-ish. At 1.3.
Okay, I'm happy with that. As you can tell, there's a bit of instinct going on, making the judgment call there. That's as much leveling as I want to do. I'm going to sand and polish that out as is, and if I'm in any way uncomfortable with any of the slap or buzz that's left, I will make a decision to just raise the action a tiny bit rather than take any fret metal, because there is a sort of limit ultimately. Okay, so with that done, I'm now going to remove the strings. I must remember to check the jack socket because I think that's loose as well. So the next bit comes to be the recrowning. And after the recrowning comes the sanding and polishing out. And of course before that, I've got to mask off the fretboard. So that's my thing clunking a bit. Okay, so at the moment that nut is pressed in place, so it's not actually glued in yet. So we might just do that before we put the strings all back on and stuff, or the new strings I should say. Going to get rid of the old ones, take off the doofer, put it to one side for a minute, get rid of the strings. Oh, there goes, lost one. Lost one. Had a very satisfactory, or a very satisfying engagement, or job I should say, on doing the work on that Gordon Smith. Come on, out you come. For those of you who remember it, it had a very odd history, or it had been a bit mashed around in history. So it had the neck had been cut inwards, so it had an hourglass shape. It had been filed or planed or sanded in. So we ran out of space for the strings in the middle, and on top of that, the strings had too little room, because not only was it cut, filed, beveled, planed into that shape, it had also had somebody carve onto the fingerboard edge, not just the frets, but they carved onto the fingerboard edge an extra bevel that you never have, and as a result of that, it had lost about a millimetre, about total two and a half ish millimetres of fret playing space, which was vital and required, considering the fingerboard, or the neck itself, was pinched or hourglass shaped. So I couldn't do anything about the overall shape of the neck other than basically cut the neck out and replace it, or another alternative would have been to strip it back to wood, and graft some mahogany on the sides, along with grafting some rosewood on as well. And in the end I chose to just, inverted commas, do a repair with the rosewood. And so what I thought I'd do is I would rescue or put right the damage done by the beveling of the wood, which didn't need to have been done. And so in doing that, I cut 2 slots all the way down, routed 2 slots, and inlaid 2 new pieces of new battens, if you like, square section blocks of, or sticks of rosewood all the way down. And then I carved that all back and re-radiused it, and then refretted it. So you've got new frets with slightly taller bevels on the ends, and that went all the way out to the correct width of rosewood, instead of having to stop where the rosewood was beveled. And so and then I also switched the bridge, because the original bridge was slightly too wide spacing for the strings as well. and I put a custom nut on which brought a slightly narrower spacing of the strings at that end, and the whole thing then became easy to play without the strings falling off, which is amazing. Great outcome. And I know that while I was doing it, it did arouse some interest of the Gordon Smith Fanciers Club, the Facebook group, and it's kind of a bit daunting. It was a bit daunting for me because, you know, when you're doing some remedial work on something like a much loved model or brand, you can very quickly find that people, first of all, they can think only a certain number of ordained people can or should be able to fix guitars, that particular brand. So there's a kind of preciousness about that. There can be a preciousness about that. And then, you know, whenever you gather together a bunch of people who have done or thought about a particular model of guitar for a long time, you get an awful lot of nerdy, and I mean that in the nicest way because I'm like that, but it very quickly becomes nerdy overthinking, and again things become very precious. So I was pleasantly surprised that some of the big cheeses from over in the Gordon Smith Fancying Club came across and, you know, made various helpful and interesting comments, but generally speaking were supportive of what I was doing. And for my part, I did my very best not to be critical of the Gordon Smith brand, because I think I haven't had the best experience of Gordon Smith guitars, but there's almost a sort of bias in there that needs pointing out, to caveat or to couch what I'm saying, and that is, if you think about it, I'm always likely to see the worst or the mistakes or the bad bits or the things that have been badly messed about with. I'm not likely to see the perfect ones that came out of the factory without any flaws whatsoever. But so by definition, if I'm a guitar tech, I'm going to see the things with problems, and so that obviously makes complete sense that the Gordon Smiths I see appear to give the impression that, you know, oh look, another Gordon Smith in. Well, no, it's another faulty one, or it's another one that's had a strange messing about done to it, and therefore it's arrived on my doorstep. So it's not a fair or accurate reflection of the quality of the brand, and I'm hopefully very fair and clear about that I don't think it's representative. If there's anything any kind of conclusion or decision I've made based on the Gordon Smiths that I've seen, I've had one that shed all of its clear finish at the first sniff of a piece of masking tape, low-tack masking tape, which wasn't great. It meant I had to, sorry, some rattling going here, meant I had to basically refinish the neck, which I don't know, I mean, there aren't that many guitars that happens to, so maybe they had a bad batch that week, maybe something happened with humidity when it was being produced or finished, I don't know. But anyway, it presented the owner and me with some extra hard work, or me with some extra hard work, because I didn't charge the owner anymore. But so, you know, I was mildly critical of finish that falls off at the drop of a hat, and I think that's a fair criticism. But again, I would certainly not say that that was a common feature of Gordon Smiths, and in fact it hasn't happened on any of the other Gordon Smiths that I've had, which isn't a huge number, but it's still fair to say that it hasn't happened on any other ones. That's not the same as some made in Mexico maple boarded Fenders, which I've had, where more than one of them in the past, 2 or 3, have suffered from poor finish adhesion problems and shed their gloss finish quickly. So that has been more than one, and so I do see them coming over the bench with a certain trepidation, because there's a sinking feeling that I might be lining up to refinish the whole damn neck if it happens to be that batch again. That's the Mexico Strats anyway. So yeah, it was a very satisfying. Oh, that is loose. Ooh, very satisfying job, and very pleased that the feedback from the owner of the guitar was very, very positive. So it's either the Chinooks or it's the local bike club. Yeah. Anyway, so I was very pleased that he was happy. So I'm going to do this. You can't really see it from here, but I'm going to use this. Going to do my best to tighten this up. Is that actually even vaguely the right size? This isn't the right size, so what the hell? Oh, it's a different type of socket. Right, I'm going to have to... what am I going to use for this? I'll have to find another sized socket. So I'm using my StewMac. I don't even know what it's called, the dibber or something. I don't know. It's a device that helps you allows you to lock the jack in place while you turn the nut on the outside to tighten it up, like so. And actually, it's quite good because you can get a fair bit of bite on it. Okay, put that there. Move that. So that's that bit done. Let us put that on there. We'll have to find another one that does the smaller sockets. Okay, so the next part of this is to cover up the fretboard. And to do that, I've got a mixture of ready cut narrow bits of masking tape and relatively narrow bits. Yeah, so that was a very pleasing job. The Garden Smith. There's a little bit of lean on this. Sort of. It'll sit dead flat. The thing is, if it doesn't move, I'm not going to glue it. That's the important thing. I've learned this. If it doesn't move when you fret it, when you bend it and so on, if it doesn't move at all, don't glue it in. There's no need. The gluing, if you've got it snug enough to begin with, that should be sufficient. There's no real need. The only thing that you gain by gluing it, or the only thing that happens by gluing it, is you end up with a greater difficulty in getting it out again in the future if you have to change it. Or now somebody might say, well, why would you ever change the nut on this if you get it right the first time? I mean, after all, does a Tusq nut wear out? Probably not, but you might in the future decide to refret this guitar with jumbo frets, or you might play it so hard every night in the rock and roll club that you need new frets. And of course, if you put new frets in, you're going to want to put a new nut in, because the fret height and the first fret action then changes because of the difference in height of the new frets. So that's one situation where you may well want to change it. I've been thinking a bit recently as well about this business of truss rods, and partly it used to be, where do I start with this? As many of us know from our youth, many of us were, and some still are, kind of afraid to adjust the truss rod. It seems a bit mysterious and worrisome, and we can be frightened of doing some damage because we don't understand exactly what's happening. And that's reasonable position to be cautious, because you don't necessarily know what is happening when you make an adjustment. But as a result of that, many of us spent most of our lives not adjusting the truss rod, and as a result, our guitars would change in different weather conditions and so forth, and we wouldn't be able to really counter that. And some people, I never did, I just I didn't play that much, I suppose, but I guess people who find some seasonal change will then go back to the tech and say, oh, it's changed a bit, can you do this? And the tech does something mysterious behind closed doors, best will in the world, but it's not necessarily seen, and then the owner doesn't really gain any insight from what happened. So it's always been vital. Oh, should I say that? So all guitars, the shape of the neck is susceptible to seasonal, environmental temperature change and so on. And you're playing, the ability to play the guitar, how it plays, is more at risk if you're starting out with a very low action, for example, which I always tend to be on my customers' guitars. They tend to ask me for a low action. So with a low action and a flat neck, you are very susceptible to any weather temperature changes, more susceptible than if you had a higher action or a less flat neck and so on. So by virtue of the fact that my customers like low actions and flat fingerboards, it also means then that when I give them a guitar back, it can be quite likely, or reasonably common, that a few months down the line when the season begins to change, that it might flatten out the neck, and then suddenly they've got some buzz coming back in, and they can feel disappointed that it's like the setup's gone again, and why, and so, and it's disempowering for them, because if they're still not sure about this whole thing about the truss rod, then to them, understandably, it feels like they've got to send it back to me or go to another tech, and it's very easy to feel bad blood about that, because you feel like you've already spent good money getting it set up. But I think what I have to try and get across is that when I set this up, for example, it will be, particularly because we've set it low and very light, it will be particularly susceptible to seasonal change or climate change. And as a result, there's no point, you don't want to be bringing it to a tech every time. So the next thing we have to do is get everybody over the fear of the truss rod, because the guitar was built with the truss rod in it because it was intended, and Fender or in everybody else intended you to be empowered to correct it. So quite often what happens is when something changes in the seasonal changes, it sounds like suddenly it's buzzing, or it seems like quite a lot feels like it's changed, and so people can start adjusting things. So they might turn the truss rod, and they might raise the action, they might lower the action and do the truss rod, and it can be very quickly get to a place where you've made several different adjustments, mainly because you weren't confident what was changing in the first place. So the first thing to say is, unless you change the nut, or unless you change the bridge settings, the first fret action and the last fret action aren't going to change on their own. You have to physically change them. But what will change on its own is the relief curve in the neck. And if it flattens out, for example, and we've leveled it to a certain action, it may quite easily be that when it flattens out, what was a playing action before becomes just a little bit too low, and you start to get a little bit of buzz or fret slap. So
the point being, for the lowest action, the lower the action, the flatter the neck, the more susceptible your playing action is to changes in the neck. But the positive thing about that is that if and when your neck does change in response to the climate or the environment, you have to first of all have confidence, or take comfort from the fact that it is only the neck, and the only thing that changes in the neck as a result of that climatic change is the curvedness or the flatness of it. So it's gone one way or the other. It's either become more curved or it's become less curved. And so if and when you've had your guitar back from me a few months, and then suddenly one day maybe the weather changes and suddenly you've got buzz, you have to have first of all the confidence to do the following. You first of all have to have the confidence to assess the neck relief on your guitar, which is a really important and a good thing to learn how to do anyway. But you need to be able to assess that, and the benefit is if you can assess that, you will find out very quickly what's happened to your neck, i.e. The fact that it has flattened out, in which case you'll do the relief check and you'll find there's no gap in the middle because it's flattened completely out, or you'll find it's gone the other way, in which case the relief has increased. You usually won't notice that, because if the relief increases you don't get buzzing, the action feels a bit taller, but it's when the neck flattens is you suddenly find yourself having buzz again, and that can be really annoying. So your first thing you do is you assess whether there has been a change and reassure yourself that what I'm saying is true, and that is it has the neck has flattened a bit. I can see it here, I can demonstrate it, when you do the test. And then once you know that, then the next step is you make a counter adjustment. So if you know that, if you suspect that it's starting to buzz because the neck has flattened out that last little bit from where it was, and that's causing you to buzz, then your hypothesis is tested by making a counter adjustment. So if it's flattened out, you add some relief into it by slacking the truss rod a bit, and then you play it and you notice that you test for relief again. You see there's some relief now, whereas before there was probably none. And with the return of some relief in the neck, you suddenly notice that it's no longer buzzing. And that's all you have to do, because the only thing that's changed is the relief in the neck, and the only thing you've done is to use the truss rod the way it was intended, and that is to return the correct or the required amount of relief to the neck. So basically you're putting back in the amount of relief that was in there when we set it up, or when I set it up for you. So that's really important. And I know some people, I've heard in the past that some people, they almost can't help but feel that they don't want that to have to be a worry for them. If they paid good money to have it set up, why can't somehow that be taken care of? And unfortunately, there's just no way around it. It's like buying a car and then being resentful that you have to put fuel in it every month, or however often you need to put fuel in. Let's call it an old-fashioned car, all right. But it would be crazy to be resentful that it didn't somehow miraculously keep reconstituting a tank full of fuel, so that you didn't have to face the bit you might not like, which is putting petrol into the tank. So adjusting the truss rod on your guitar is kind of like that. It's why it's put in there, for you to control the curvature of the neck, and the reason the situations or the circumstances in which you would need to control the curvature of the neck is exactly that, when the temperature or the environmental humidity or whatever changes and causes the wood in the neck to shrink a bit, or flatten out, or twist, or whatever it does. That's just likely to happen to wood because it's organic. So I think we need a bit of a campaign to say to people, this is absolutely likely to happen. You absolutely need, as an owner, to know at least this one thing. And you, in order to do that, the other thing I have to probably go large on is you have to sort of find a way to help people not be afraid of it, because a lot of people have been told all their lives that oh, you don't want to make that adjustment to your truss rod, you could do some terrible damage. That's a really, it's one of those horrible dogmas that gets what's the word, promulgated, you know, spread around. It's not true. You really, you have to work very hard to damage your truss rod. If it's broken already, no, but if you're with a standard average truss rod in a standard average guitar, you will not succeed in breaking it. You rarely will succeed in breaking it, unless it's faulty first, in which case there's nothing you could do about that, or unless you swing on it whilst wearing cartoon dumbbells, triangular lead weights like in the Beano cartoon. Right, that's the only way you're going to break it. So somebody suited somebody once upon a time to have that myth going about that it was dangerous to adjust your truss rod, and maybe it was because it kept luthiers and guitar techs in work, because I mean, if I told you how to do it, then you'd know how to do it, you wouldn't need me to do it for you, right? Well, unfortunately, the truss rod is one of those things that you can't hide behind the wizard's curtain or whatever they say, you know. Now I'm suddenly realised there's an unpleasant connotation. I'm using it in the old-fashioned wizard behind the curtain sense, okay? Don't make me have to explain it. Anyway. So yeah, that's a bit of a crusade I've got to go on, I think, to get people to see that. And I've made a video in the past about it, but I don't think it was as in your face as it probably needs to be. And I should really, it almost should be built into, maybe in the small print of every invoice that I send, you know, if this happens, go here, you know, if and when. But then you find yourself having to explain that it's absolutely correct that you should be ready to adjust your own truss rod, because etc. etc. So as you can see, I'm making a loud noise and lots of dust. And working through a series of grades of sandpaper, wet and dry, to polish and sand out and polish out these frets. And as I'm doing it, I'm making sure I cover all the frets evenly, but I'm also rolling over onto the edges to make sure that I'm catching the edges of the frets as much as possible as well. Just to help try and soften the edges off, make it as playable and pleasant as possible. So the grades I'm using here range from what am I using? 400, 600, 1000, 1500, and then I go to micro mesh 1500, 1800, 2400, 3200, 3600, 4000, 6000, 8000 and 12 in micro mesh. I've got some more orders as well, actually. So
quite a lot of different grades, and it's noisy, as you can see, and requires a bit of muscle power to keep it going. It's not exactly like a cross-country run, but you can work up a sweat on a sultry late summer's evening. Had a interesting email message from somebody in the United States who began their message with, "I've spent 20 years failing to find guitars that are set up right, and it's killing me that these badly set up guitars are getting in the way of my creativity, and I would give everything I own just to have a well set up guitar." So on one hand it's yeah, fine, I mean, I can do that, and so I write back and I say things like, "Would love to be able to help you. As you may know, I'm in the UK, and it's become fairly expensive to send guitars from the UK to the US. So if you're going to send me one of yours, that's expensive, or it has a cost. If I'm going to send it back, I'm going to set it up, there's a cost, and then when I come to send it back, there's a ridiculous courier cost back from the UK, and there may be some duty decided to be due on it as well, because even though there is a large-scale system available via UK trade and industry or whatever to set up as a repair service provider, it's absolutely unwieldy and completely unsuitable for a one-man band like me. It requires you have your own shipping department, basically, and you have to pay all the duty on all the guitars that come to you from other countries. And then in the next year, if you can prove you exported them all and have all the documentation of their path inwards, your documentation of them going outwards, and you can match all of that up, then you may be able to claim back the duty that HMR, His Majesty's government, took off you. And to be quite honest, I would starve to death before I managed to build up that sort of documentation, and it would just cost me so much in fees, it wouldn't be worth it, because it would be me out of pocket, not the customer. So anyway, I kind of wrote back and said, I'd love to do it, if it's worth enough to you, I'm more than happy, but just be conscious that there is a kind of a ridiculous, and now at the moment you will struggle to get a postage courier to the US for 150 quid. When I first started doing this 7 years ago, when I first sent a few to the States, I could get them over there for 60 to 75 quid. But as with everything around Brexit time and beyond, it's become outrageously expensive. I don't know why. I don't think it's got, people say, well, Brexit's got nothing to do with US shipping, and I know it hasn't, but everything's gone up in our fabulous post-Brexit cost of living, soar away cost of living shitstorm. Anyway, so yeah, bottom line is it's a minimum of 150 now. In fact, that 150 is now the cheapest of all the options on the list, and it's probably more than likely closer to 200 now for a guitar package, and that is with an unknown and untrustworthy amount of insurance. You can add a bit of insurance premium, but I don't have huge confidence that insurances ever pay out on guitars, no matter who you insure with. Anyway, so I was interested in doing that work. I mean, I love it's very tempting for me, very tempting, when somebody says they're in, they're in trouble, I can't play, this is ruining my life, help me, sort of thing. I'm like the rescue ranger. I feel I love to be able to take a problem and put it right, a bit like the Gordon Smith. Anyway, so we shall see whether this person, well, what I suggested actually as a first port of call, I said, look, it's a lot of money involved. I said, first of all, if you want me to do your guitars, and I also said that with somebody for whom it's really critical and you so far haven't found a guitar set up any way that you think is right, I think we've got to be realistic and say that we can't assume that what I do is going to be right for you, and it would make sense. You can't come to my house and try my guitars, so it would make more sense to me to suggest that why don't you, if you're going to want your guitars done, your own guitars, and if money really isn't that much of an object, as you say, what's more important is getting a guitar you can play, then I suggested, why don't you do what a lot of customers do, and including some American customers, is buy a Thomann Harley Benton or a guitar from Thomann, have it shipped to me, I'll set it up, send it on. Yes, it will cost my setup fee plus the 160 odd quid shipping, but for the cheapest amount of money you will get to see whether, you'll see what I do and you'll see whether it suits your style, and if it does, then you'll know that you can send your other guitars to me and at least they'll come back playing the way you want. If it doesn't, well, you've got a decent Harley Benton that you could sell second-hand and recoup some of your money if you didn't keep it. So it seemed to me that was a smart way to approach it, because I think I don't want to be, as a business person or a supplier of services, shall we say, one of the things you learn if you stay conscious and open to learning about it, is you learn that you can't control, and sometimes you can't read or anticipate customers' expectations. So you definitely can't control them. It is possible, and I've had it happen, that there are some customers whose expectations actually probably can't be met, and you realise that sometimes too late when you've engaged with them and you've done your very best, and you suddenly realise that there's nothing you could do, and probably almost certainly nothing anyone else could do. And it's usually, those customers usually come to me from a string of other people who failed to do the thing right for them, and there's a pattern, obviously, and so you have to kind of keep an eye on your ego, because your ego wants to be the one that can fix this where no one else can. There's an ego buzz in that. Think that you're the one who can do this, where all the other luthiers have failed. So ego can get hooked into that, and it can blind you to facts that another less blinded part of you actually, in my case, already knows from the offset, is that this person has, far from, rather than it being a bunch of terrible luthiers who've all let this person down, there's something in this person's expectations which are also potentially unmeetable, and that's very difficult because you want the business. You don't feel it's your job to be kind of judging your customers and having to sort of turn them down, because they'll almost always they will ask why, and if you do turn them down, you kind of you either don't say anything or you make a lie up, and I'm hopeless at lying. I just thought I'd let you know, but I hate lying. I can't be bothered. My life becomes unmanageably complicated if I have to think about lying, so I don't. And I don't want to do it when somebody says, well, why aren't you doing the setup for me? Why are you turning me down? And I have to say something like, look, I've been in this business long enough now to know when I've met someone who's for whatever reasons, whose expectations may not be able to be met by someone like me. And I just have to say, look, I'd be really honest with you about this. It's not your fault, it's not my fault, it's just how it is. But what I can tell you is that it's almost certainly that if we go ahead with this, neither of us will be satisfied, because I will end up not having the satisfaction of pleasing you. You'll either you'll be sending it back wanting things changed, which will make me feel like I haven't charged enough because I'll be doing things forever, just changing things, hoping that you'll like it. And all the time I'll have moved away from what I know that I do well, which I don't have to convince people about, and I should not be trying to prove that it's done well. So it's a really interesting one, and this prospective customer, it could be just about in that place for me, and he may hear this and may go, well, that's fine, I'm not going to send my stuff to you, and that's fine too. It's a very important thing to be realistic about what is feasible and what isn't, and to, I guess, just admit that there are times when you cannot meet the customer's expectations, and you have to be able to recognise that. If you don't, you will be in a world of pain, as they say. Okay, so we are nearly done on this. Now it's time to put some new strings on, stretch them out, and get them ready for playing. New Truss Tusq string trees, Tusq nut in place. Let's just tighten this one up a bit more. So now we're going to put on some new D'Addario 9s and stretch them out, and then they'll be free to collect. I don't know, tomorrow, I guess, or tomorrow, Monday onwards. So everything cleaned. Lots of talking. I don't know how long this has been running. We've just been on a straight run now, so 1 minute 13 and 5. Okay. Fingers crossed. I mean, luckily there's been no major funny things going on here, and thankfully the neck was cooperative, which is probably why it feels like a nice neck to begin with, or it's almost certainly why. So on we go with the new strings. Now, yeah, so anyway, that's just I've had a couple of experiences in the past where I've not listened to, I've known my instinct, well, my experience has told me this is a situation where neither you or the customer are probably going to end up happy with this. And I think the hard part is, like I said, is calling time on it or not getting into it without being judgmental and upsetting somebody else, because it's if I don't want to take on someone's job, it's got to be, it's not their fault. I need to be polite and respectful above all, and they, like I said, I think they deserve an honest explanation, even if it's uncomfortable. I've had situations in the past where I've had to I've had to call time on a project and be very honest about why, and that was very difficult to do, but in the process of it, I had to sort of say, look, this is my experience, and I would perhaps offer it to you as some feedback about how I've seen things work and how they work for me, and not wanting to get into a similar position again. Just a quick one on this then, Dom, for the stringing. and you probably know this because I've done yours before, but just to remind you, pull the things all the way through, whoops, in a straight line, string all the way through. I grab it at the first fret, pull it back to the second, and then start winding on. I'm starting with a D here because I just want to peg the string down in case, the nut down in case it was tempted to ping off if I did the edges first, but I don't think it will. So I hold on to keep this string, the held string, taut at all times, and to begin with I want it to go over the loose string. So I hold it up, the loose string comes underneath, and then as the loose string comes around I yank it up, and from now on I push the held string underneath and I keep it low as possible, and that's what we really want. We want it to come from as low down as possible. Obviously you've got to make sure it sits back on the slot, the notch. Now because of this at the moment, we are a bit low on the action at this end, so I need to wind it up a bit at both ends, because I think we're going to need to come down from there. So I'm just raising the action to start with. Now I'm going to do the A string all the way through in the notch, grab the first fret, pull it back, hold on to this held string, bend it round, hold it up over the loose one. As the loose one comes round, pull it through and up, send the held one underneath as low down as possible. Don't want it under too much pressure, because we need to adjust the bridge action. And then we do the G in the notch, pull back one fret. Now this gets caught under the string tree, so I unhook it from the string tree, keep this tense over the top of the loose one. As the loose one comes round, hoik it up and push down the held one, and then down and underneath the string tree. There we go. So on and so on. Yes. So yeah. So coming back to the customer from the States, I hope that he thinks that this sort of test approach is a good one, because I think we'll be able to find out sooner rather than later if I can meet his needs. I think that's just the important thing. There's no point going too far into something if I'm not going to be able to give him what he wants, particularly because it's so important to him. So I just think, rather than be overconfident and the ego run away with me and say, yeah, of course I can, I'm the only guy that can do this for you, my start point is going to be, I've no idea right now whether I can. Neither of us do. So let's try and make this the most confidence-inspiring way forward. It's realistic, and takes on board the fact that I may not meet those expectations, and it's fine. We can say, actually, I don't like the way that Harley Benton plays that you sent me. Let's not go forward with my expensive or my special other guitars, and I'm totally cool with that. What I don't want is to get caught in doing something for somebody who I'm not the guy for them, if you see what I mean. And I apply that often to guitar sales as well. When somebody's looking for a budget guitar or a cheaper guitar, and they start talking about haggling for prices and stuff, and I would just say to them, or even it's a very rare occasion that somebody asks me, could I do a setup for less, or could they, could you do it for, well, why is it this much? And my stance on that is, look, that's what I charge, because I value and believe in what I do, and it's fine if it's not in your budget. I've no judgment on that, and there are other people who you can go to for a less expensive setup, and please do, but no hard feelings. But I'm not the guy for you, and if I do take on this work, then the chances are we'll both be
dissatisfied, because if I do it for less than it's worth my time, then I'll feel slightly resentful, somewhat resentful, and you may be happy with it, but I don't think you'd be happy if you knew that I was feeling bad about having done it at a cut price. It's not the relationship I ever want with customers. So it's an interesting one, but I think it does come from having to be honest about it, which is not a conversation you sort of expect to be having with customers, because it can be a bit edgy, or it can be a little bit close to the bone. But I think it's probably, I prefer to do it that way, just to be straight. So anyway, on a plus side, I would very much like to, it'd be great to do this work. I can never figure out which is the right way round. They appear to be coming down. Going up. That's it. Going down, going up. We'll get there. Okay. Going down, going up. Hard work. It'd be so much better if it had those little slots in the top of the bridge. Squier 1.2. All right, now I'm going to get me a note again. This is annoying me slightly. That is not sitting quite where I'd want it. It probably. So this is where nothing ever works out simple. So we've got a slight bit of sitting up on that end, which I don't want. But the problem is we've got a limited amount of flattening we can do to that slot, and if we start to try and flatten the nut any further, I think we will find ourselves potentially running it out of space a bit quickly. So I think what we need to do is we need to just very gently glue down these ends slightly, which as I sort of preferred not to have done. We need them touching down. I mean, the supporting bit in the middle, actually in some ways you can sort of take that bit out a little bit. You get a thin way of, how can we do it? Let's do this. Yeah, we can sort of take a little bit out of there, and it may just sit just a tiny bit better on its little two edges. This foot in the middle is just a support, really. But if we shove that in there like so, what we want is it to sit down proper job at either end, and that is now better. And it was just sitting up then on that tiny bit, but I now need to move this down
a small fraction, tiny fraction, and still a tiny fraction, possibly too much of a fraction. No, dead on. Now I still don't want to move it. I still don't really want to glue it. If it's going to sit in the right place and do its stuff correctly, that's all I really want it to do. So let's try and avoid gluing if we can help it. So the first thing we've got to do is tune it all up, and then we've got to stretch it again. So the things we have left to do are stretching and intonating. I wonder where that thing went. Okay, let's make sure this comes from underneath this time. Oh, come along now, will you? It's going the wrong way. Over the top. Under. Thank you. Over the top. Now under. Under, thank you. Okay. That's seated very well. Perfectly. Right, get a note. Take a note, Miss Jones. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so stretch time. Thumb and four fingers. Stretch, 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 stretch. And we'll put it out of tune, and that's the whole point. We want to stretch the slack out of it until it's out of tune, and then we'll tune it back up and stretch it again. So the tuning stability on any guitar is down to two primary things: the nut and the unreleased slack in your strings. If you take care of the nut, and that means fitting something like a Tusq nut, as we've done here, with the slots cut right, free moving, no friction, get the right material, the right slots cut, and it's fitted to give the right first fret action. If you do that, we're half the way there. And the other half, since we've done the nut, is to stretch all of that slack out of the strings, and that's the bit we're doing now. If you get both of those bits right, your guitar will stay and play in tune, aided by the Tusq string trees, so that you haven't got any dragging on metal, which you do on those butterfly string trees. I like to repurpose those and use them as grounding lugs inside the guitar electrics compartment. Just seems to be a good way of recycling, so they don't go in a bin, but they're only good for that. You don't want to have metal against metal if you can help it. Very close. Okay, next, intonation.
and that I took Dom through this the other day. I was explaining to him how the intonation is a mechanical issue that we represent as sound or a pitch. So by using pitch, we are really setting a mechanical, physical length. I better be quick because my darned battery in the unit here is wearing out. It's pretty spot on. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Looking at the space, I think the D might be a bit sharp. Yep. Yep, you could see that just from the spacing. So I'm going to push back the D and the A as well. Whoops, wrong way. So my experience of the staggering pattern of 3 wound and 3 plain strings tells me right from the outset, oh, this doesn't want to go any further. That is no good. It's trying to actually come out rather than go back. Yeah, it's telling me, my knowledge of the stagger pattern is telling me that already that this is not going to be right. So I'm pushing back. Now, like I said, this thing, you've got to be a bit physical with this because these individual saddle screws don't want to move. They just want to wind themselves out. So you have to be a bit careful of that. So this should be close. Lovely. There we are. Done. As always, black guitars pick up grime and fingerprints instantly when you set them up. So you almost have to give them a last clean over before you go in the bag or before they go back to the customer. But this is done. Starcaster, a beaut of a guitar now. Pickups, I think we're in the right place. I adjusted them the other day. They look about spot on when you hold them down at the last fret. Looking good. Yeah, there we go. Thanks for watching. Hope that was instructional. Starcaster, 2 new string trees, Tusq, new Tusq nut. Not glued in. If it ever moves, glue it in, press it down hard, but I don't think you'll need to. It's just safer not to have glue. It doesn't get caught up for the next time. Frets leveled, crowned, sanded and polished out. As you can see, beautiful shiny things. Body cleaned up. Jack socket on the side, very rattly, tightened up. I'm in sort of 2 minds with those about whether to use a light thread lock or not. I haven't in this case. It can make it difficult to get apart, even the lightest thread lock, so probably better to just tighten it up every once in a while. But you can see the pattern on the bridge here has the furthest forward on the scale mark is the high E, back for the B, back for the G, forward for the D, back for the A, back for the E. All right, so that's the pattern it will normally take, and that's proven out or borne out by the intonation exercise we just did there. So lovely guitar. I mean, that's such an unusual sight for me. This great wall of neck sticking up. That you could even have a truss rod adjuster right at the end there and get away with it on this guitar, but we don't. We have one on the end. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you again soon. I'm Sam. This is Really Love Guitars, and yeah, back for another one very soon. What's coming in the next few days? I can't think. Some. See you soon.